Saturday mornings at 7 on KSJE Farmington. KSJE is supported by San Juan Regional Medical Center, here to meet your urgent and emergent medical needs, whether they are COVID-19 related or not. Medical emergencies happen when you least expect them, whether it's a stroke, heart attack, illness, or injury. San Juan Regional Medical Center's caregivers are here to provide care to you and your loved ones. Find out more online at sanjuanregional.com. Eight minutes past 10 o'clock. It is Monday morning, March the 8th, 2021. Good morning, everybody. I'm Scott Michlin. Thanks for tuning in to KSJE, 90.9 FM over the air here in San Juan County, New Mexico, 103.3 FM on the air in Durango, Colorado, and streaming everywhere, of course, from our website, KSJE.com. Welcome also to our viewers who are watching this visual radio program. The video is streaming live today to the KSJE Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and our Twitter account. We're glad that you are with us this morning, everybody. Coming up in the next few moments, we're going to be talking about energy, the environment, jobs, and much, much more. Mike Eisenfeld is my guest today from the San Juan Citizens Alliance. Hope you'll stay tuned for our conversation, which begins in the next few moments right here on KSJE. And then later on this hour, we'll be talking more technology with Lewis Campbell, part of our Monday Reboot segment, every Monday at 8:50 a.m. right here. And the next hour, Mick Hess will take us roving with the arts, and Mick is playing music from Beethoven this morning on the program, which begins after the newscast at 9:06 a.m. on KSJE. And don't forget, of course, we invite you to connect with us on our other social media pages like Instagram, in addition to Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. And let's talk about the weather forecast, shall we? It's a mixed bag of weather outside right now. Mostly cloudy, 44 degrees in Farmington at the moment. We have a forecast that looks something like this, a mixed bag of sun and clouds and snow flurries is in the forecast. So increasing partly sunny skies today, but a chance of some scattered showers or maybe a snow flurry. It looks to be some precipitation surrounding the Farmington area this morning, maybe more to the north and south. But today's high should reach 70 degrees if we get there. Clearing up overnight with a low of 37. Then those winds will kick up for Tuesday and Wednesday with partly sunny skies and a high of 65 on Tuesday. Partly cloudy and windy on Wednesday with a high of 52, and maybe another storm system moving in Wednesday night with a chance of snow showers and a low of 31. Chance of rain or snow Thursday, the high 51. More chances for rain or snow on Friday with a high of 51 degrees and an overnight low of 27 degrees. Well, let me introduce my guest who is joining me this morning, as I mentioned, from the San Juan Citizens Alliance. Mike Eisenfeld is the Energy and Climate Program Manager with San Juan Citizens Alliance. Mike, good morning, and thanks for coming back to KSJE.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Scott. Good to see you.
Good to see you and have you here. Appreciate it. You have been busy, I think, since we last talked, and there's a lot to talk about. You were telling me before we came on the air this morning that you've been following the New Mexico State Legislature, and so maybe let's start there. Are there some bills that you are watching move through the roundhouse, and what are they about?
Yeah, the legislative session has been a 60-day remote session, so
Right.
Lots of weekends and lots of dialogue about transition and economic development, and the bills that we have been watching include climate solutions bills, which seems to sort of have bogged down. There seems to be a climate denier block in some of the legislators, and
Now there's a majority Democrat majority in both houses, right, in the governor's office. So why aren't if these things are important, why aren't they moving through, at least as far as the Democrat agenda goes?
the process seems to have bogged down with lobbyists.
I see.
And the oil and gas industry exerts a pretty significant influence. And, there does have to be sort of a balancing of the southeastern part of the state and the northwestern part of the state, which provide a lot of revenues and have a lot of existing infrastructure. So oil and gas isn't a hypothetical. It's very much ingrained in our community. And so you want to sort of be understanding of some of the production processes and some of the opportunities there are. The methane issue remains unresolved. Revenue distribution, reclamation, cleanup of existing facilities remains very much out there. And so I'm not sure that a lot's going to get resolved during this legislative session. It seems like things are kind of coming to a standstill.
Gotcha. But of course, a lot of folks would say oil and gas and the energy industry gives a lot of money to this, provides a lot of revenue for the state from the production taxes and things like that come out of southeast New Mexico and to a certain extent northwest New Mexico. And so the state really can't ignore that revenue stream, can they?
Right. It's historic in its legacy, and there is an association, but the oil and gas industry also has to come to the table with solutions, and that can be complex, but it's also, we need to acknowledge that there's 40,000 existing wells up here in processing, and that the industry is not benign.
Right, understood. And so you're watching things, but they're kind of stalled, as you said, or not much hope for passage, I guess, this session is what you're saying?
Yeah, the climate solutions bill seems to have sort of become dormant.
I see.
To some extent. There's some other bills that are pretty interesting, like penalties for bad players in the oil and gas industry, and then there were also some other bills that had to do with transition for impacted communities. The Grants Gallup area has been really impacted by closure of a refinery and Escalante coal plant.
Right.
And also we have been trying to sort of make sure that the discussion includes northwestern New Mexico, which is undergoing some economic change and transition, and that the focus is on what comes next for our communities.
Right, and we'll talk about that as well, because there certainly is a lot of change to talk about and things that are going on. But before we move from the state level, let me actually move to the federal level, because of course there's a new presidential administration. We're waiting on confirmation of a new Secretary of the Interior, and those two changes could mean some big national changes, I would assume, policy-wise and maybe legislation-wise for energy and the environment in New Mexico and elsewhere.
Yeah, living in northwestern New Mexico for the past 25 years, I'm always sort of struck by the opportunities that we have with federal land and being surrounded by tribal land, and the kind of jurisdictional morass is what I call it. But the lands that we live amongst are supposed to be under a multiple use principle. And for too long, I believe that the Bureau of Land Management has just basically considered themselves an oil and gas office here in Farmington, and I hope that changes, because some of the processes have sort of been going on and on and on, where analysis of things like the Mancus Gallup formation, resource management plan, environmental impact statement, it's been a 7-year process. It was announced that the government was going to do an intensive analysis in 2014, and here we are in 2021, and I would suggest that it's time for a new resource management plan to figure out how our lands are going to be utilized that surround us. Because I was out yesterday, and it seems like a lot more people are visiting Farmington, and whether Farmington's going to become the next Moab or something is probably beyond the scope of my intelligence. But
well, there's a lot of folks trying to make that a potential reality, and shift things,
and
right?
With the fluctuation between winter weather and then 71 degrees later today, for those of us who are trying to jolt our journey, I guess that there's some opportunities out there. But we'll have to see sort of what happens with some of these agencies, like the Bureau of Land Management. And
sure,
one of the things that's been fascinating in this process is the concept of consultation, because over these last 7 years with the Mancus Gallup Resource Management Plan Amendment, EIS, I believe there's like 27 cooperating agencies and consulting parties that are now sort of like, hey, we want to know what are the impacts of 3,000 new wells amongst places like the Chaco cultural National Historic Park and the World Heritage Site, which is Chaco Park, Aztec Ruins, and 39 Outliers. And the archaeologists talk about how this area is all sort of connected with roads and then the tribal affiliations to places like Chaco, and the fact that Chaco brings in people from all over the world. So what are we doing to protect those areas? And are we really looking at 3,000 new wells? I don't think so.
Gotcha. And because of a lot of things, right? Price being one of them, I would suppose, of the natural gas and potentially oil.
The oil and gas industry has changed dynamically, and there aren't really any majors in San Juan Basin anymore.
Right. Those major companies have all moved out or sold to smaller producers, and that's what we have working now in the basin.
Yeah, Hillcorp's pretty big, but hard to know what sort of investment they're going to be putting into the San Juan Basin. I know that they have some interest in other places, including Alaska.
Right.
And then the focus in New Mexico has been the Permian Basin.
Sure.
The Permian Basin was booming, and
right.
maybe that has changed a bit, but it would behoove us to start looking for sort of economic diversification. And you hear a lot of people talking about tourism, recreation, retirees. Farmington's a pretty unique area, and maybe we will make that transformation. But we need to embrace it as a community, because I always hear, oil and gas is coming back, or the war on coal is over, and I don't believe that at all.
Right. We're still seeing a lot of change, for sure. And I think, don't you think we're seeing more embracing of this change in the local economy, moving to the outdoor recreation and some of the efforts? It seems like the city government, the county government are behind those efforts. And for a long time, I don't think we talked about that type of thing.
Yeah, I think it's encouraging.
Okay.
The other thing that's sort of happening is that we did participate in the Energy Transition Act, and the Energy Transition Act was a bit confrontational, but controversial. But
and this was regarding, I think everyone probably is up to speed on this, but just in case folks don't know, this was about the P&M's decision to close down the San Juan generating station and how they would be divesting themselves of that piece of property and that energy part of their portfolio, and what that would mean to the communities of Kirtland and San Juan County and even Farmington and those places with that transition. Am I getting that mostly right?
Yeah. So I was, in 2017, P&M basically came to our community as part of a whistle-stop tour and said, hey, oh, by the way, we're thinking about closing San Juan Generating Station in 2022, retiring our shares as the majority owner. We're not going to keep the facility open until 2053, so it's a 31-year difference. And they wanted to kind of know from our community what we thought. And I expressed concern to P&M that they had already made the decision, and that it wasn't really legitimate for them to be kind of asking the community what they thought when they already knew what they were going to do. So at that point, we looked at it as a 5-year window to figure out, kind of what comes next. And so as part of the Energy Transition Act, we were adamant that the property taxes needed to be replaced by any replacement power, and that the school district needed to be provided adequate revenue.
Central consolidated.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that was just essential. And basically, a lot of people were of the opinion that the San Juan Generating Station is going to be replaced by natural gas, but the result is that there's 3 solar projects, that 2 of which it looks like are power purchase agreements by PNM, and the primary one is called San Juan Solar. It's primarily on private land just to the northeast of San Juan Generating Station. That would be like 598 megawatts of solar and 300 megawatts of battery storage. That surpasses the 847 megawatts at San Juan Generating Station right now. And I think it's a incredible opportunity for the community to benefit from investment that it's like $1 billion investment for the northwestern New Mexico, when I don't see any other sort of investment happening. At
It's
that
significant,
scale.
significant. And so that would help being on private property. That would help the property tax loss that we're losing with the San Juan Generating Station if it goes off the tax rolls, and that would certainly help then these entities we're talking about, like Central Consolidated Schools. San Juan College is certainly part of that as well, to be clear, and others, right, in the county for sure.
Yeah, and so basically this particular project would need a generation tie that goes across federal land and goes to a substation. So they're basically using stranded assets, and they're going to use the existing transmission lines.
Right.
It's maybe a misnomer that with kind of the talk that we've had about the carbon capture, carbon sequestration project, the Enchant project, that they would have access to the transmission and they'd have access to the water. And that goes to San Juan Generating. That's not necessarily the case, and they don't seem to have the substations. So with this PNM power purchase agreements, they're basically going to be utilizing some of their infrastructure for solar. And in my opinion, that's going to drive a lot of economic development. And I would like to see the communities get more of the power. For so long, we've had this hundreds of miles of grid and the export of our electricity. And it seems to me that it would be good for us to be using some of this in our communities.
Gotcha. And that would be the Farmington Electric Utility that would probably be part of that conversation.
Well, Farmington Electric Utility owns 5% of San Juan Generating Station. And if San Juan Generating Station is indeed going to retire in June of 2022, I suggest that that's right around the corner, and that there has to be a lot of negotiations with the operating agreement, because San Juan Generating Station has a variety of owners, including Tucson Electric Power, who wants out, Los Alamos, who wants out, PNM, who wants out. And PNM is kind of going through a bunch of changes. They're potentially merging with a big Spanish company called Avangrid Iberdrola. And then there's also some discussions about the Four Corners Power Plant being abandoned. And our organization, we've intervened in some of these cases, not only in New Mexico, but in Arizona. Mm-hmm. And in Arizona Public Service Company is the main owner at Four Corners Power Plant, and they're talking about a 2031 retirement. And they've also, looks like they're going to put up $144 million in transition money for impacted communities, primarily in the Navajo Nation. And so probably that's the level of transition funding that we're going to be seeking in some of these cases in New Mexico.
Interesting. And that's the other big shoe that I guess could be dropping here soon, is that APS decision to abandon the other power plant.
The Four Corners Power Plant.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is on tribal land, and so the tax implications and the other implications are a bit different than the San Juan Generating Station.
Yeah, it's a 60-year-old facility, so there's a lot of liabilities, and the big issue out there was that there was a lot of money sunk into pollution controls, specifically selective catalytic reduction. But it'll be interesting to see the way that the abandonment of Four Corners Power Plant is being structured kind of in the Public Regulation Commission case in New Mexico, is that PNM is seeking to basically give Navajo Transitional Energy Company $75 million to take it off their hands, and we object to that.
Right. But that NTEC, the Navajo Transitional Energy Company, is the entity that owns the adjacent Navajo mine.
That's correct.
So,
that's correct.
So what are they going to do with the Navajo mine if they don't have a power plant to sell their coal to?
Right. Well, that's $1 million question at this point, is sort of, the economics of some of these facilities. But we're seeing like rapid closure of coal plants. And I would state that that has to do with the economics. And so, Navajo Generating Station closed in 2019.
That was in Page. Arizona.
In Page, Arizona.
You mentioned Escalante near Grants.
Escalante closed like really abruptly last year. The Cholla power plant's going to close in 2025. And we'll see what happens with San Juan Generating Station. But
right.
Like I said, time's ticking, and I don't believe that there can be adequate permitting or adequate oversight of any reasonable transition at that facility. I don't believe that the Enchant project is real.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment, because that is where the city of Farmington has certainly put a lot of their eggs and their baskets into the Enchant Energy proposal to take over. The city of Farmington would take over, I believe, the San Juan Generating Station with all the other owners opting out, and then they would in turn come into an agreement with Enchant Energy to develop this carbon capture idea to continue to produce power at this plant and produce it cleaner than it was before. I know San Juan Citizens Alliance has a number of concerns about that proposal. You mentioned some earlier about access to water, access to transmission and substations and things along that line. The Enchant folks would seem to tell us that everything's moving forward on schedule. Yeah,
well, I look at, the only way I can gauge it is I look at their timeline, and they had a December 17th, 2019 presentation, and at that point they were claiming that by January of 2022 that they were going to have amended the Energy Transition Act to extend compliance date by 12 months. That never happened. That by June of 2022 that they would have a EPC construction contract finalized. They don't have that. That in July through December of 2020 that 1.25 billion of financing would be closed. And then in January of 2021, 2 months ago, that they would start construction. And then if you look at their timeline, they talk about June 2022, control and ownership of 95% of San Juan Generating Station transferred to Enchant Energy Corporation. But that's when the facility is slated to be closed. So the only thing that I can think is that they would have a project that they may ultimately own, but that they have no permits, that they have a dormant project that sits for 2 or 3 years while they try to put carbon capture, carbon sequestration on this aged facility. And the other thing that's happened since the last time we talked is that the project that they based this on, Petronova in Texas, has been closed. And so if I was a real estate guy, which I'm not, I would be like, what are the comparables? And what's the state of the technology? And the other thing that's happened is that they don't really have a market, as far as we can tell, for enhanced oil recovery. So they're looking at a straight-up carbon sequestration project. And I just think that that doesn't make sense. You're burning coal to create carbon dioxide to then just bury it.
And the plan was, or at least one of the proposals was, to pipe that carbon dioxide right to southeast New Mexico or other places where they could use it in the oil recovery. But that is what you're saying they don't have in place, or may not work out the way they expect.
Right, and they need a 28-mile pipeline to bring that over to the... It's a Kinder Morgan line that comes from...
like Cortez area.
Dome in Cortez area. And that's diminished. They used to drill for carbon dioxide. And so maybe the discussion is, with carbon capture, carbon sequestration, can it be applied to some of our big oil and gas facilities up here? But you shouldn't just be creating carbon dioxide for the purpose of burying it. That's just absurd. That's just unacceptable.
Right, and I suppose the Enchant people would say, but that's the way to continue to use this investment in this power plant and create this energy that's there and reliable, and that would be a way to maybe keep that plant going, keep the jobs, because jobs are a big part of these conversations, are they not?
Yeah, jobs are a big part of the conversation, and that's why we want to have just and equitable transition plans, and we think that the solar projects are going to create a lot of construction jobs. They may not have the operation jobs that some of the fossil fuel projects have, but you got to look at kind of the externalities and the pollution and just the legacy of these facilities. It's not going to be easy to slap carbon capture, carbon sequestration on San Juan Generating Station. It's a very intensive process. It creates its own pollution sources, and I just don't believe it's a good investment. I wonder, do they have investors? I haven't heard anything. I mean, I guess that's a question for them.
Right.
Do they have investors?
Understood. Interesting. And another area that you say maybe the future for job creation would be some of these reclamation projects. Then, if we are planning to shut down these major power plants and the associated mines, there would be a lot of reclamation involved to do it correctly moving forward.
Yeah, we're definitely advocating for full decommissioning, and one of the things that happened December 18th was the demolition of the stacks at Navajo Generating Station, and gosh, that was sort of a finality.
Right, that's been a landmark in that community forever.
But we've seen a legacy, like when you're traveling between here and Bloomfield and you see like the old refinery that was sort of left in place, that's not okay. We need full decommissioning and kind of a transformation of, our environment, and the last thing we need is some of these big facilities left in place. So that's definitely something that is part of our discussion in some of these processes that we're involved in the state.
Right. Well, and especially I would say, too, if the plan is to be in this outdoor recreation mecca, you don't want people driving around or going on these trails and coming across some old abandoned infrastructure, whatever you have, if it's not working anymore.
Well, when you're out in like the Glade Run recreation area, that's a designated recreation area, and there's 600 wells in there. So in my earlier days, I would be on my mountain bike and traveling right through the middle of a well pad when it was being cavitated, which is basically sort of open flame, and getting yelled at. And I kind of was like, well, I'm on the trail.
Right.
And so anyway, yeah, that's part of the legacy around here, is that we have a lot of oil and gas infrastructure. We have coal. We have the remnants of uranium, and that's just a matter of fact. I mean, even in Durango, I don't think that a lot of people know that the dog park is on top of uranium tailings, or that there were smelters all along the Adams River, or that they used to dump the tailings from the uranium mill right into the river and come down our way. Yeah. So that's just part of the reality, is that but we do, I believe, have an opportunity to start thinking about kind of the environment that we live in and the landscape that we live in a little differently. And I don't really see a lot of oil and gas development on the horizon, and I certainly don't think that the coal industry is going to have a resurgence.
Gotcha. Mike Eisenfeld is my guest this morning. He is the Energy and Climate Program Manager with San Juan Citizens Alliance, and I think it should be noted, too, and you said that a little bit, Mike, that the communities of Durango, and I think Moab, too, to a certain extent, were very kind of energy-dependent communities until they changed things and turned things around, and now we see the economies that those two communities have created for themselves, which are quite different from extraction industries and energy.
Yeah, and Moab
can be done.
Moab had a uranium tailings impoundment along the Colorado River that was cleaned up, and I think that the uranium site in Shiprock should be cleaned up too, and then there could be a fair amount of jobs. Like we always heard the buzzwords of like reclamation, mitigation, revegetation, and most of the roads out kind of in northern Farmington, up in the foothills, a lot of those are pipeline right-of-ways.
Right.
And then there's a lot of well pads kind of all over the place, and so we'll kind of see what transpires with the new administration. And I'm excited about Deb Haaland coming in because that should provide a little bit of a different perspective. It's always good when old guys like me can kind of step aside and let other voices be heard. But I think that that's one of the things that I'm most interested in, is that there needs to be sort of a more cohesive sort of discussion about what consultation means, what communities want to do, and also I'm looking forward to maybe the ability for people to participate more comprehensively. I mean, part of our thing is that we were asking for a pause on the Mancus Gallup Resource Management Plan Amendment EIS because it's just not possible for a lot of communities to be involved
at the moment.
Yeah, at
because
the
of
moment.
COVID, because of all these different things, right?
And that if there was some thought given to the process, that there needed to be an acknowledgement that we just couldn't continue. I mean, we had been going to Gallup for all these meetings, and it was sort of like the movie Groundhog Day. It was sort of like the same meeting.
Over and over.
Where we kept saying, well, we just don't see the justification for 3,000 new wells. Maybe in 2014, but here in 2021, we need to adjust. And
things have changed.
And so the planning document that the BLM has is dated in 2003, and it usually has 20-year cycles, so we're coming up on that.
Gotcha. So by the time they approve this, they may be time to do it again.
I don't think they're going to approve this.
I hear you.
I don't think they're going to make it.
Right. I hear you. Well, Mike, we're almost out of time. San Juan Citizens Alliance, again, it's an organization I know that depends on the generosity of donors. You had a couple, I think, job openings if folks want to continue and help you do the work that you're doing.
Yeah. I've been working for the San Juan Citizens Alliance for 15 years, and we are actually looking for another climate and energy person and a communications person. So I encourage people to apply and also to support our organization. I think a lot of times people go, oh yeah, they're just against everything. But in a lot of ways, I believe that our intervention in some of these processes has helped sort of the transition discussion, and that we do want to see opportunities for people up here to innovate, to be part of processes that are associated with our landscape. So that it is important that if people are displaced by coal plant closures and the continued sort of flatlining of oil and gas, that they be given up other opportunities.
Right. Well, and it's important to hear these other perspectives too, which is why I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much.
You bet.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you, Scott.
Great to have you here. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
Take care. That's Mike Eisenfeld from the San Juan Citizens Alliance, my guest this morning on KSJE. I'll be back with more in just a moment. The time right now is 8:42.
Airbnb CEO Brian Chesky says post-pandemic, cities might actually want the company around. From American Public Media, this is Marketplace Tech. I'm